depleting fisheries, poisoning the physical environment, and experiencing increasing environmental shocks. And this is a region which is definitely right in the center of those blows. Hurricane Katrina was a tragic eye-opener for the United States. As a Category 5 hurricane, but this kind of shock is the daily life and reality of the Caribbean and Central America, which has lived with these kinds of upheavals, and one could add seismic upheavals as well as the tropical storm upheavals throughout its history. The entire region of Central America and the Caribbean is in zones of multiple hazards, zones of hurricane hazards, seismic hazards, earthquakes, volcanoes, you name it. And this has been part of the very history of the region. But now the environment challenges us everywhere. The high temperatures of the sea surface in the Caribbean was the proximate reason for the massive drought taking place in the Amazon now. This is a basic climatological process where the warm rising air over the heated Caribbean Sea leads to descending dry air over the Amazon with potentially disastrous ecological consequences for both sides of that divide, increasing hurricane activity in the Caribbean, increasing drought and destruction in the Amazon, which is one of the great heritages and common needs and treasures of the entire planet. So in this sense, with all of the great accomplishments and with a quality of life that I would insist is above even the measured statistics, in my view, as having experienced ground realities in all continents of the world save Antarctica, these three challenges of economic stagnation, inequality, and shocks from the human ecological interface are the great unmet challenges of a continent that has so much potential to successfully face these challenges. Now let me say a few words about some of the pathway ahead. I was asked as I was coming in if I could provide a crystal ball. The answer is no. Of course I can't. I can only provide a few hints of what I think are ways forward. They may be, unfortunately, so platitudinous that they won't be very helpful, but I'm going to try to address these three areas: stagnation, inequality, and the natural hazards and shocks from them in the context of the Americas. First, on stagnation. So much has been said, hundreds of books, tens of thousands of articles and words spilled on the Latin American economic crisis. I hardly dare say a fresh, or even believe that one could say a fresh word, but I'm going to just try to add one element to this debate. Not adding it, but I'm going to try to put my focus on one element that I think is important. There's been tremendous attention to institutions, to governance, to economic institutions, rule of law, land title, and so forth as the essential issue, making markets work. I think that there's been some truth to that focus, but I have always felt that that missed part of the point of Latin America's economic stagnation. As I've mentioned to many of you on other occasions, my experience as advisor in Asia and in Latin America always left me with a powerful overriding feeling. When I came to Latin America, the issues were always about budgets, exchange rate, taxation, institutions, land title, and so on. When I went to Asia, it was always the discussion about technology, about the newest thing, about how do we get into IT, how do we get into biotechnology, how do we get into whatever was the dominant leading edge of the world economy. This, to me, has been one of the palpable differences between Latin America and Asia that I think has been underemphasized rather than overemphasized in all the discussion. Latin America lost technological ground over a quarter century. It did not, in general, play a leading edge role in the rise of the electronic sector, in the rise of biotechnology, in the rise of information technology. That's where we see Asia in the dominant position. Latin America did, in some areas, improve technology based on natural resources, which was always the usual home. Chile, for example, while the growth has been a natural resource-based growth, it's been natural resource-based on the basis of improving technologies. When I go to the market, as I do every day, and I buy fruit these days, and every single one of them has Chile on the sticker, to get fresh peaches, fresh plums, grapes, and so forth in a wintertime, beautifully packed, beautifully high quality to the markets here, and that's been a large part of Chile's growth. That is high technology, actually, high technology logistics. But broadly speaking, Latin America did not get engaged in the technology revolutions of the last 25 to 30 years adequately. And I put that as a fundamental part of why the stagnation took hold. I've always felt that the IMF and the World Bank had the wrong models in this, that it was too much about market liberalization and stabilization, and not enough industrial policy, in fact, to make this work. Industrial policy is not anti-market, it's pro-market if it's done right. No one wants industrial policy of state-owned enterprises. What one wants is the public sector helping through investments in science, higher education, basic infrastructure, tax, holidays, whatever other incentives to bring in the technology that can be the cutting edge for the future. And I would just say in a nutshell that this is part of what Latin America's future needs to be more than it has been in the last quarter century. And looking at the ambassador from Brazil, I can say I believe that Brazil has turned the corner on this in an important way. To be a good industrial policy is technology-led, and it's also export-led. If you look at the Asian model, it's not protectionist industrial policy, it's international competitiveness-led technology industrial policy. It's selling embryos to the world. It's selling new fuel sources to the world. It's bringing the best of technology to bear to world markets. So it's open, market-friendly, but it is industrial policy. And one indicator that I look at is the share of an economy devoted to research and development, investments in higher education, openness to foreign and encouraging foreign investment in high technology areas, publications in global scientific journals, patents being taken out. And I see the beginnings of a dynamic approach here, especially in South America, led by Brazil. But I believe that this is a very important point for the future, because the natural resources are giving a lift right now, but they cannot by themselves be the basis of long-term development, never have been and can't be. It's the brain power, and it's the technology that counts. And markets alone are not the way to develop that leadership. One needs markets working together with public investments, philanthropy, for higher education, for science, and so forth. And that's a model that I see finally taking shape in the region. Now, this is actually related to inequality, the second theme that I mentioned. The biggest issue of inequality is that the rich and the powerful don't so much like to invest in the poor and unpowerful. This is the dominant fact of the Americas, including the United States, which has the lowest social spending of any advanced industrial economy by far. We're the only high-income country in the world that leaves 40 million people without health insurance. It's unheard of in Europe. It results, in my view, from the heterogeneity of our societies, and there's a lot of evidence for that proposition. Places of racial inequality, ethnic inequality tend to have lower public investment levels. If I could put it very crudely, white people have not always liked to invest in the health and education of black people or indigenous populations. I believe that this is changing in our generation decisively. I really believe it, and I feel much more optimistic about it. Because I think the days when a small elite could figure that they could use power to maintain influence, they can see that can't conceivably work. Because the traditional forms of wealth and power don't matter anymore. What matters is the dynamism and vigor of one's society. And if the society is illiterate, uneducated, there's no chance that an elite has any future there. And so I think that the rise of democracy both provides a push from below, and the lessons of the world provide a lot of guidance as well. That inequality can be overcome by the investment of every human being in every society. And this, to me, is the great turning point for the region. Because what's going to happen, I believe, is a massive increase of educational and scientific attainment for the region, and democracy is going to lead the way. And I see this happening in Brazil, if I could turn again to this example, because Brazil, by being by far the largest economy of the region, really is so important for the future of the whole region. Brazil now has had more than a decade of a dramatic increase of secondary education. This is why I believe there's been a fundamental turning point. You look back in the 1980s, maybe only 15–20% of the population actually finished secondary education. Enrollment rates were extraordinarily low. Now 2 presidents in a row, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, President Lula, have made major investments in secondary education and increasing investments in higher education. And that means across race, across ethnicity, across regions. And that is the change, I believe, that is fundamental to overcoming the longer-term inequalities of the region. I actually believe we're turning the corner on this. But I think it's important because I read papers, even books that say, what is the source of Latin America's inequality? Why is it the highest inequality in the world? As if this is a mystery. These are societies that were born in inequality. These were societies where the entire political and social structure was developed in inequality. But democracy is changing this, and in my view, decisively and historically, not just for the better, but for the best. And so I believe that this is the way forward. And ensuring investment in the human capital is the most reliable, most definitive manner of reducing inequality over the long term in a modern society. It's making sure that every child grows up with basic health, with basic nutrition, and with an opportunity not just for primary education in the 21st century, but all the way through university education to develop skills, knowledge, scientific capacity, artistic capacity to their full extent. That's what will end the inequality that has so dogged this region for so long. And I believe that it's on its way to basic change. I believe that the election of